out of 9. But would you be willing to stand up there and say, as one of those voices, to say to the federal government, we've had enough. Take it and stick it.
I'm one of the people that asks a lot of questions. And so I have no issues when people say, well, you're a little crazy and a little weird. Well, that's okay, because sometimes we have to ask those questions, right? And we have to be willing to listen to the answers. Right now, we're not asking the questions. We have a 7-2 vote on virtually every decision that's made at City Hall, 6-3 now that Mr. Waring has won his seat. Realistically, in order to challenge these things, you are going to need to have the majority of the council. And that's where it comes down to having fresh leadership and somebody that isn't a part of the political system to be able to stand up and say, we need to take an honest look at this. When we find the programs, we need to have the courage and the backbone to stand up and say, this isn't for us, and we're going to get out of this program right here and right now. And I am absolutely willing to do that if it's the right decision.
Thelda? I know you didn't get to meet with Senator McCain, but...
You were lucky.
Political. Realistically, when somebody makes a commitment to you, you follow through on that commitment. And if they don't follow through on their commitments, you call them out on the carpet and you make sure that you remind them of their commitments and make sure that they follow through on them. Our city council in the last year, I believe it was, although it may have been earlier this year, sent a bill to the State House asking for the ability to control spending, and everything over a certain dollar amount had to be bid out. It doesn't sound like leadership. It doesn't sound like controlling our own spending. It doesn't sound like being willing to lead by example. It sounds like asking for help, and it sounds like asking for Big Brother to watch over us. And so we're inviting a lot of those issues that we have from the federal government mandating things now at the state government. Thankfully, that bill didn't pass, and I don't think it needs to, but what we need to have on the council, instead of 7-2 votes, which keeps things off the agenda, is having open, honest discussions about how we're spending our money, how we're allocating our resources, so that we don't have to go to the state, we don't have to continue to rely on the federal government for as much money as we have. And when we do get those commitments from people, we need to make sure that they follow through on them.
Ben, I have a question.
All right.
How are the candidates going to bring the residents of Phoenix together? Because it is a nonpartisan race, so it doesn't matter what the candidates are registered. How are they going to reach out to all aspects of the community to bring Phoenix back to one?
Okay, Eric, I'll let you address that first, and Thelda address the other one.
Right now, our City Hall meetings are at 3 o'clock on Wednesdays. Policy sessions are at 2 o'clock on Tuesdays. So please adjust your schedule accordingly if you want to know what's going on with your city. My opponent's monthly meetings are at 7:30 a.m. on the 4th Friday of every month at the Deer Valley Airport. So feel free to make yourself available then if you'd like to speak with her. Those are two things that we need to fix. This is supposed to be a representative democracy. I've walked over 1,000 miles in my district knocking on doors during this campaign. I've had conversation with literally thousands of voters, one-on-one conversations at their home. I will continue to do that. I will continue to look for meetings in people's areas instead of making them come across the freeway to the Deer Valley Airport. I will have meetings in their neighborhood. I will make myself available to every block watch that needs or wants their council person to come out and have a conversation with them. And I will work with businesses to make sure that their needs are addressed so that we can get people back to work, so that we can make sure that when people have issues, they have places to turn to that isn't to the government first. I believe, quite simply, that if we are representative and we reach out to people and have conversations, there's a lot more commonality than there are differences. I've talked with firebrand Republicans on the campaign trail, and I've talked with Union flag waving Democrats on the campaign trail, and we've had good relationships with both sides of those. Again, our common elements bind us together much more than the divisive issues divide us, as long as we take the time to listen and have conversations. I've tried to get on the email blast list twice now, and I've been kicked off both times. I don't know if it's because I'm a candidate or not, but that's okay. One of the things I'd like to point out is a couple of things that Thelda said. She puts her cell phone number on her campaign signs. That's great. You're campaigning 6 months on your term instead of for the 4 years that we've been out there. Technology is changing. Email isn't the only way to communicate with people, especially when we're trying to talk about how do we reach out and how do we galvanize people together. You need to have a Twitter account, you need to have a Facebook account. A lot of departments in the city have that, but our leaders don't. And Thelda does not have a Twitter account that I've been able to find.
I don't.
So certainly, even if the representative isn't doing that, certainly somebody in the staff could do it. She can have somebody teach her so that we can communicate in ways, not just us mandating it, but having conversations with our constituents in a manner in which they find effective and they find convenient on their schedule so that we can continue to reach out and bring people together.
Follow-up? Satisfied?
Just what have you done to bring different cultures and different people together? Is there any cross-cultural reach out?
I'll let Thelda start.
Let me make sure I understand your question. You're talking about how to bring people together that live in the community, correct?
People of all cultures and stuff. Obviously, since you are not the incumbent, you can't hold meetings with the Chinese delegation, but what would be your plan to reach out to the different cultures and segments of the community?
My office, business office, is 75th Avenue in McDowell, which is in the middle of about an 85% Hispanic zip code according to the most recent U.S. Census data. I opened that office about 2 years ago, and in the past 2 years, in order to better communicate with some of my clients, I have learned Spanish. I lived in Beijing, China for a year, and I speak Mandarin Chinese. There is a Chinese cultural center that I know where it's at. I shop at the store quite frequently so that we can go smell the smells and take me back to my time in Beijing. And we hold events through my office for the Hispanic community. At the end of July, I believe, we had an event at the Desert Sky Mall where backpacks were handed out to students who couldn't afford a backpack full of school supplies, for instance. So those are the types of outreach that I'm already doing to make sure that it's not a segmented community and it's not looked at as one side versus another, but instead it's how can we bridge the gap so that when issues come up and when bills are passed and we need to make sure that we have some communication, it's not coming through a third person or somebody outside of the city council, but the leaders can stand up and say, I can address this personally because I've been a part of the community, I know the community, and I can communicate with you however you're comfortable with.
Okay, the question I have about the city is there's been a lot of talk during the election. I don't know how much of it's still going on out there because I realize as different people won, some of these things have gotten quiet. But during the election, Agenda 21 was talked about quite a bit. The higher parking rates were talked about quite a bit. The higher water rates, where they raised everybody's rates on that. I talked with Thelda today. She talked about the food tax she hopes goes away or is going to try to get it to go away. My question on this is, the city seems to have done a lot of things, irregardless of what the reason was. At the time, I realized there was less money coming into the city. Now it's kind of stabilized. But the Agenda 21 thing was more of a United Nations type move. We talked a little bit about the sanctuary city that Phoenix, as most people look at as being. What do both of you intend to do to put these issues to rest so that, you know, when you look at Phoenix, you're looking at not only the city of Phoenix being the 6th largest, but also the city that's the state capital. And a lot of people look at us that way. And they, quite frankly, you know, living in Arizona, I don't want Phoenix or the state of Arizona to begin to be looked at like the state of California. So what do either or both of you have to say on these issues and what you plan to do to correct them? And we'll start, let's see, I think we started with you the last time, correct? We'll start with you this time, Eric, and go to Thelda.
Our current council has gotten to be really good at we've gotten very good at using reactionary policies to issues that have come up. The food tax was put on the agenda and passed with about 24 hours notice, and it took $29 million out of the economy and went for some questionable uses. And my opponent on Friday admitted shame on me for not knowing what I was voting on. That's a concern of mine. When my council person doesn't understand what she's voting on a bill that's going to take $29 million out of the economy, I have some concerns. Ultimately, what we need to have on the council is some leadership. We need to have people that are willing to look out 35 years and say, not just what do we have to respond to today, but what are we trying to build so that 35 years from now, our state is a fabulous state and not looked at like a California or a Michigan, where I'm from originally. Some of the specific issues that you have as far as water rates, as far as the food tax, those are issues that we knew were coming. They were passed with 24 hours. They didn't go to a committee. They didn't go to any place else. But now to take them off, we have to send them to a committee. And in fact, my opponent, when she asked for it to be put on the agenda, didn't have a plan. If you go back and look at the actual notes from the meeting, she actually asked the city manager, I want to know that there's a plan to repeal the food tax. I don't need to know the details, but I want to know that we have a plan. Though that's not my spin on it, you can actually pull up the actual minutes to the meeting and hear that answer. Realistically, in order for us to lead the state and be the jewel of the Southwest and the jewel of the western half of the United States and compete with Chicago and New York and Philadelphia and those cities, we need to have real leadership on the council. And that's what I can provide, and that's what I'm concerned about, and one of the reasons that I'm running for office.